When my wife and I moved into Oak Ridge Estates 6 months ago, we believed we had found peace. The neighborhood appeared perfect, tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and a sense of community that had been missing from our apartment downtown. Our modest two-story home was not the largest on the block, but it was ours, and we had worked hard to afford it. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, waving from their driveways and offering pleasantries about the weather as we unloaded our moving truck. I remember the exact moment Corinne Wexley entered our lives. She approached our front door on that first Saturday morning, clipboard in hand, pearls gleaming at her neck. Her smile did not reach her eyes as she introduced herself as the Homeowners Association president. "Welcome to Oak Ridge," she said, voice dripping with manufactured warmth. "I wanted to personally deliver your copy of the community guidelines." She thrust a binder toward me that was thick enough to stop a bullet. "There have been some issues with new homeowners not understanding our standards," Corinne continued, her gaze drifting critically to our welcome mat, which apparently did not meet regulation dimensions. "I do weekly walkthroughs to ensure compliance. It keeps our property values high and our community beautiful." With that, she pivoted on her designer heel and marched back down our walkway, pausing only to frown at our mailbox. That first interaction set the tone for what would become a relentless campaign of nitpicking and harassment. Within days, we received our first official notice, a letter citing improper placement of our garbage bins, which, according to Corinne, were visible from the street for 17 minutes beyond the allowed window after collection. The notices continued, each more absurd than the last. Our grass was 1/4 inch too high. The trim on our windows was eggshell when the approved color was soft white. My car had been parked in our driveway for more than 8 hours without moving. My wife suggested we simply comply to avoid conflict. "It is not worth the stress," she would say, nervously eyeing the window whenever Corinne's silver Mercedes cruised past our house. But something in me refused to be bullied. I had paid for this home. I maintained it well, and I would not be controlled by arbitrary rules selectively enforced by a woman drunk on the smallest measure of power. After 3 months of escalating tensions, something changed. My wife noticed unfamiliar footprints in the mulch beneath our bedroom window. Items in our backyard had been moved. Twice, I found our gate unlatched when I was certain I had secured it. That was when I decided to install security cameras, one above the garage door facing the street, another on the back porch, both clearly visible. The garage camera was the one that truly ignited Corinne's fury. The day after installation, she appeared on our doorstep, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "That camera violates Section 12 of our community guidelines," she declared without preamble. "External modifications must be approved by the Architectural Committee." "I have reviewed the guidelines," I responded calmly. "Cameras for security purposes are permitted under state law, which supersedes HOA regulations. Additionally, they are necessary for the safety of my family." Corinne's nostrils flared. "It changes the aesthetic of the neighborhood," she insisted. "People feel uncomfortable being recorded. You need to remove it by Friday, or the board will need to take action." What she did not know, what no one in the neighborhood knew, was that these were not ordinary security cameras. As a technology consultant with connections to the local sheriff's department, I had access to a pilot program they were running with a security company. My cameras not only recorded to my personal server, but also live-streamed directly to the sheriff's monitoring system through a special application. Every second of footage was being preserved off-site, creating an unalterable record of everything that happened on my property. I did not mention this feature to Corinne. I simply reminded her of my legal right to protect my home and closed the door as she was mid-sentence about potential fines. That camera, with its unblinking eye, was about to become my greatest ally in a battle I never wanted to fight. The weeks following the camera installation transformed Corinne's harassment from annoying to alarming. What had been a pattern of petty citations evolved into something that felt increasingly personal and vindictive. She began documenting my every move, appearing on my street multiple times daily, clipboard and camera phone in hand. Each morning brought a new complaint. My sprinklers ran 4 minutes longer than permitted water conservation guidelines. A delivery package remained on my porch for more than the 6-hour maximum allowed by some obscure bylaw. The American flag I displayed was apparently 2 inches larger than regulation size. The noise from my air conditioning unit, identical to everyone else's on the block, was suddenly disruptive to neighborhood tranquility. The most disturbing development was Corinne's increasingly bold intrusions onto our property. My security cameras captured her walking along the perimeter of our home, sometimes stopping to peer through windows or take photographs of supposed violations. In one particularly unsettling instance, she used a measuring tape to document the height of our hedges, pressing her face against our dining room window afterward to see inside. My wife began drawing the blinds even during daylight hours. "I feel like we are living in a fishbowl," she confessed one evening, jumping at the sound of a car door outside. "I cannot even garden without feeling watched." The strain was visible on her face, dark circles under her eyes, a perpetual furrow between her brows. This was supposed to be our sanctuary, not a source of anxiety. I attempted the diplomatic approach first. I sent a carefully worded email to the entire HOA board, attaching clips that showed Corinne's trespassing, requesting intervention and clarification of property boundaries. The response came from Corinne herself, copying all board members. "As HOA president, I am authorized to inspect properties for compliance. Your continued resistance to community standards suggests an unwillingness to be a cooperative member of Oak Ridge Estates." No other board member responded separately. Later, I would learn that Corinne had systematically pushed out anyone who challenged her authority, leaving only those who feared or enabled her behavior. She had created an echo chamber of power, with herself at the center. The situation reached a critical point when a certified letter arrived demanding the removal of my security camera within 48 hours. It cited a previously unenforced provision regarding electronic surveillance equipment and threatened daily fines of $100 for noncompliance. The letter bore Corinne's signature, along with those of 2 other board members who I had never met. "Please," my wife pleaded that night, "just take it down for now. We can fight this legally later, but I cannot handle the stress anymore." Her hands trembled as she held the letter. "She is not going to stop." I understood my wife's fear, but something deeper, something fundamental to who I am, refused to concede. "If we give in now," I explained, taking her hands in mine, "there will always be something else. Today it is the camera. Tomorrow it will be the color of our shutters. This is about more than rules. It is about standing up to someone who thinks their authority has no limits." That night, I installed a third, smaller backup camera hidden within our porch light fixture. I meticulously reviewed our HOA bylaws, confirming what I already knew. Nothing prohibited security cameras on private property. I double-checked that all footage was properly backing up to both my secure cloud storage and the sheriff's monitoring system. Corinne had declared war on our peace of mind. But unlike her other targets who had either submitted or moved away, I was quietly gathering evidence of every overreach, every trespass, every abuse of power. The security camera she so despised was becoming an unblinking witness to her own undoing. Tuesday morning dawned with deceptive tranquility. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen blinds as my wife, and I shared breakfast before work. For a moment, we pretended we were a normal couple in a normal neighborhood, not locked in an escalating Cold War with the HOA president. Maybe she will back off, my wife suggested, though her tone lacked conviction. The board must realize how unreasonable these demands are becoming. I nodded noncommittally, checking the security app on my phone. All cameras showed clear feeds. The neighborhood was quiet, sprinklers cycling on lawns, newspapers being retrieved from driveways, the occasional car backing out for the morning commute. No sign of Corinne's silver Mercedes. I kissed my wife goodbye as she left for her nursing shift, promising her that things would get better soon. Neither of us knew how prophetic those words would prove to be. At precisely 9:17 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the front camera. I glanced at the live feed to see Corinne marching up our driveway with purpose. She wore her standard uniform of pressed slacks and a polo shirt embroidered with the HOA logo. What was not standard was the household broom clutched in her right hand like a weapon. I moved to the front window, staying partially hidden behind the curtain. My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain calm. Whatever was about to happen, I needed clear documentation. I activated the recording function on my phone as a backup to the security system. Corinne paused at the edge of the driveway, scanning the windows as if checking whether anyone was home. My car was in the garage, giving the impression the house might be empty. Apparently satisfied, she proceeded toward the front of the house, stopping directly beneath the garage camera. "I know you can see this," she shouted, looking directly into the lens. "I warned you. The board warned you. No more surveillance in Oak Ridge Estates." She dragged our garden stool from beside the front door, positioning it beneath the camera. Despite her immaculate appearance, she climbed onto it with surprising agility, bringing herself eye level with the device. For a moment, she stared directly into the lens, her face filling the frame with undisguised contempt. "This ends now," she declared, raising the broom handle. The first impact missed, glancing off the wall beside the camera. The second connected with a sharp crack that was audible even through the closed window. The camera housing tilted but held firm. Corinne's expression contorted with frustration as she readjusted her grip for a more forceful swing. I remained motionless behind the curtain, documenting everything. There was a strange calm in watching someone unravel so completely, knowing that every second was being recorded not just on my devices, but directly to law enforcement servers. The third swing connected solidly. The camera mount broke free from its bracket, dangling by the power cable. Corinne's face registered satisfaction as she delivered a final decisive blow. The camera lens cracked, the indicator light flickered, and then it went black. "Problem solved," she announced to no one, stepping down from the stool. She surveyed her handiwork with hands on hips, nodding to herself before turning to leave. She paused briefly to straighten a garden gnome she had disturbed during her assault, the absurd attention to aesthetic detail even in the midst of property destruction perfectly encapsulating her warped priorities. My phone vibrated with an alert. "Sheriff alert active. Property damage detected." The system had automatically flagged the incident as a potential crime based on the abrupt camera failure and the preceding violent motion. The footage was already being reviewed. I did not yell after Corinne. I did not confront her or rush outside. Instead, I dialed the non-emergency number for the sheriff's department, my voice steady as I explained the situation. "Yes, I have reviewed the footage," the dispatcher confirmed. "It has already been flagged in our system. Would you like to press charges for property damage and trespassing?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. And I have additional documentation of prior incidents if needed. As Corinne's Mercedes pulled away from the curb, she had no idea that her moment of triumph was actually the beginning of her downfall. The camera she had destroyed had fulfilled its purpose perfectly, capturing the very act of its own destruction, the evidence already secure beyond her reach. There is something uniquely satisfying about watching justice unfold in real time. At precisely 2:15 p.m., a sheriff's department SUV rolled slowly down our street, stopping in front of Corinne's Colonial with its immaculate flower beds and Yard of the Month signs still prominently displayed near her mailbox. I sat on my front porch, ostensibly reading a book but actually observing the scene from behind sunglasses. Several neighbors had emerged from their homes, curiosity overcoming suburban discretion. Mrs. Abernathy from across the street pretended to check her mail for the third time in 10 minutes. The Johnsons paused their lawn work, leaning on rakes with poorly concealed interest. Sheriff Collins and Deputy Martinez approached Corinne's front door with unhurried professionalism. Collins was a veteran officer I had met during the security camera program implementation, steady, by the book, and immune to dramatics. He rang the doorbell and stepped back, hands clasped behind his back in a posture of calm authority. Corinne answered wearing an apron, as if she had been interrupted while baking cookies rather than destroying property just hours earlier. Her smile faltered when she registered the uniforms, but she quickly recovered, squaring her shoulders. "Good afternoon, officers," she greeted them with manufactured brightness. "What brings you to Oak Ridge today? Is everything all right?" Sheriff Collins nodded politely. "Mrs. Wexley, I am Sheriff Collins with the County Sheriff's Department. This is Deputy Martinez. We are here regarding an incident that occurred this morning at the residence of your neighbor." He gestured vaguely in the direction of my house. Corinne's expression shifted subtly, a tightening around the eyes, a slight twitch at the corner of her mouth. "I am not sure what you mean," she responded, voice perfectly modulated to convey confusion. "I have been home most of the morning." Deputy Martinez withdrew a tablet from his utility belt, tapping the screen several times before turning it toward Corinne. Even from my porch, I could see her posture stiffen as the video began to play, her own image, in high definition, swinging a broom at my security camera. "We have received a complaint about destruction of property and trespassing," Sheriff Collins explained calmly. "The footage you are viewing was captured this morning and transmitted directly to our department through our Community Security Partnership Program." Corinne's composure cracked. Her hands flew up in a defensive gesture. That camera was unauthorized. As HOA president, I have repeatedly issued notices that it violates our community guidelines. I was simply enforcing our rules after multiple warnings were ignored. Sheriff Collins remained unruffled. "Ma'am, HOA guidelines do not supersede state law regarding private property rights or authorize the destruction of another person's property. Your neighbor's security camera was legally installed on his own residence. But he is recording people without consent." Corinne's voice rose an octave. "That is an invasion of privacy. He has been documenting my movements, harassing me with complaints to the board. I demand to see everything he has recorded." Deputy Martinez stepped forward slightly. "Mrs. Wexley, Florida is a single-party consent state for recording. Moreover, the camera in question was recording only the property owner's driveway and front entrance, areas where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy. The footage shows you deliberately entering private property to damage surveillance equipment, which constitutes criminal mischief under state statute." The realization that her actions had legal consequences beyond the insular world of HOA politics visibly dawned on Karen. The color drained from her face, her eyes darting from one officer to the other, seeking some escape route from accountability. "This is ridiculous," she attempted, voice quavering slightly. "That man has been difficult since the day he moved in. He refuses to follow our community standards. I was acting in my capacity as HOA president to maintain neighborhood guidelines." Sheriff Collins shook his head slowly. "Your position as HOA president does not grant you authority to destroy private property. Based on the evidence and the homeowner's statement, we are issuing you a citation for criminal mischief and trespassing. You will need to appear in court on the date listed." He extended a clipboard with paperwork attached. Karen stared at it as if it might bite her. "This cannot be happening," she whispered, more to herself than to the officers. Then, louder, "Do you know who I am in this community? I have been president of this HOA for 7 years. I have connections at the city council." "The law applies equally to everyone, Mrs. Wexley," Deputy Martinez stated flatly. "Please sign to acknowledge receipt of your citation." With visible reluctance, Karen scrawled her signature on the form. As Sheriff Collins tore off her copy, he added, "I should also inform you that the homeowner has substantial documentation of previous incidents that may constitute harassment. I would strongly advise against any further contact with him or his property." From my vantage point, I could see the neighboring curtains twitching. The perfect facade of Karen's authority was crumbling in full public view. As the officers returned to their vehicle, Karen remained frozen in her doorway, citation in hand, watching as they drove away. Only then did she notice me sitting on my porch. Our eyes met briefly across the perfect lawns that separated our homes. In that moment, the power dynamic that had defined our relationship for 6 months inverted completely. For the first time since we had moved in, I saw uncertainty in Karen Wexley's eyes, and it felt like the first breath of freedom. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community clubhouse. The email notification cited urgent security and compliance issues requiring immediate board attention. But everyone knew what it was really about. Word of Karen's confrontation with law enforcement had spread through the neighborhood with the efficiency of a wildfire. The usually half-empty monthly meetings suddenly became the hottest ticket in Oak Ridge Estates. By 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the scheduled start, the small meeting room was filled beyond capacity. Folding chairs had been added to accommodate the crowd, and latecomers stood along the walls. The energy in the room was palpable, a mix of curiosity, anticipation, and the distinct buzz that accompanies public drama. I arrived deliberately late, walking in at precisely 7:00 p.m. with a leather portfolio under my arm. Conversations hushed momentarily as heads turned to track my entrance. I nodded politely to several neighbors but remained silent, taking a seat in the second row that someone had apparently saved for the evening's main attraction. Karen sat at the center of the board table, flanked by the 4 other board members. She wore a navy blue blazer over a crisp white blouse, her power outfit, but the effect was undermined by the tightness around her mouth and the drumming of her fingernails against the tabletop. To her left sat Michael Chen, the vice president, a retired accountant who typically followed Karen's lead without question. Tonight, however, he seemed to maintain a deliberate few inches of distance between them. "Let us call this emergency meeting to order," Karen announced, striking a small gavel against the sound block with unnecessary force. Her voice carried the artificial brightness of someone determined to project normalcy. "We have several urgent matters to discuss regarding neighborhood security and compliance." For the next 20 minutes, she orchestrated what was clearly a carefully planned deflection, droning on about landscaping violations, the upcoming community yard sale, and proposals for holiday decorations. Not once did she mention the incident with my camera or her citation. The other board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as she studiously avoided the elephant in the room. Finally, during the open comment period, Eliza Hernandez from 2 streets over raised her hand. "I think we should address what happened on Tuesday," she said directly. "Many of us have heard about an incident involving security cameras and the sheriff's department." Karen's smile froze. "I am not sure what neighborhood gossip you have been listening to, Eliza, but tonight's agenda focuses on legitimate HOA business." "Actually," I spoke up, opening my portfolio, "I believe this qualifies as legitimate business. I would like to formally address the board regarding ongoing harassment by the HOA president, culminating in the destruction of my security equipment." The room fell silent. Karen gripped the edge of the table. "This is not the appropriate forum." "Article 8, Section 3 of our bylaws," interrupted Michael Chen unexpectedly, "states that members may bring grievances to the full board during any scheduled meeting. I believe we should hear what he has to say." Karen shot him a look of pure betrayal before regaining her composure. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "You have 3 minutes." I stood and connected a flash drive to the projector setup. "I will try to be brief," I began, addressing the room rather than just the board. "Since moving into Oak Ridge 6 months ago, my family has experienced escalating harassment from Mrs. Wexley, purportedly in her capacity as HOA president." The screen behind me illuminated with a series of date-stamped photos and video clips. "What you are seeing is a documented pattern of selective enforcement, trespassing, and intimidation. Mrs. Wexley has entered my property without permission on 17 separate occasions, peered into windows, and issued citations for supposed violations that are not being enforced elsewhere in the neighborhood." I clicked to the next slide, a split screen showing Corinne measuring my hedges while identical or taller hedges on other properties remained unsighted. "This is not about compliance. It is about targeted harassment." The room remained silent as I methodically worked through my evidence. When I finally reached the footage of Corinne destroying my camera, several gasps were audible. The video quality was excellent, capturing not just the act but her clear statements of intent beforehand. "As you can see," I concluded, "this escalated from selective enforcement to criminal property damage. The sheriff's department has already issued a citation, and I have filed for a restraining order to prevent further incidents." I returned to my seat amid murmurs of conversation. Corinne's face had transitioned from forced calm to barely contained fury. When she spoke, her voice quavered with the effort of control. "What you have all just witnessed is a calculated attack on the integrity of this board," she declared. "This person has been resistant to community standards from day one. His so-called evidence is nothing but selective recordings designed to paint me as the villain for simply doing my job." Board member Rebecca Watson, who had remained silent until now, cleared her throat. "Corinne, I have to ask, did you actually destroy his security camera?" "I took action to remove an unauthorized surveillance device after multiple warnings," Corinne responded, avoiding a direct answer. "As president, I have a responsibility to enforce our guidelines." "By personally destroying private property," Michael Chen pressed. "That is not in our bylaws or procedures." Corinne's composure finally cracked. "Someone had to do something," she snapped, slapping her palm against the table. He has been mocking our rules since he arrived, installing cameras, monitoring board members, probably recording all of us right now. Are you all so blind? He is trying to take over this community." The outburst hung in the air, shocking in its naked hostility. Karen seemed to realize she had revealed too much, attempting to recover with a weak smile. "I may have been overzealous in my methods, but my intentions were to protect Oak Ridge." Rebecca exchanged glances with the other board members before speaking again. "I move that we temporarily suspend Karen's authority as board president pending a full investigation of these allegations." "Seconded," Michael Chen said immediately. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. "You cannot do this. I built this board. I founded this HOA." "All in favor," Rebecca continued as if Karen had not spoken. 3 hands raised decisively. The 4th board member, an elderly man who typically napped through meetings, belatedly added his own after a nudge from Michael. "Effective immediately," Rebecca announced. "Karen Wexley is suspended from her position as HOA president. Vice President Chen will assume duties temporarily until our investigation is complete." Karen stood so abruptly that her chair toppled backward with a crash. "This is not over," she hissed, gathering her belongings with shaking hands. "You will all regret this betrayal." As she stormed toward the exit, the room erupted in applause, not directed at her, but in support of her removal. 6 months of pent-up frustration from other homeowners who had suffered under her reign released in a cathartic wave. In that moment, Karen Wexley was no longer the most powerful person in Oak Ridge Estates. She was simply a woman who had finally pushed too far and found the limits of her authority. As the door slammed behind her, I caught Rebecca Watson's eye across the room. She gave me a subtle nod of acknowledgement, both thanks and apology wrapped in a single gesture. The revolution had been televised, after all, and it had been captured in 1080p. Anyone who believed Karen would accept defeat gracefully severely underestimated her capacity for retribution. With her public power stripped away, she retreated into the shadows, but not into silence. Instead, her tactics shifted from official harassment to something more insidious. The rumors began circulating within days of the board meeting. My wife overheard whispers at the community pool about how we were troublemakers who had connections to city officials, planning to redevelop Oak Ridge. A neighbor who had previously been friendly stopped returning waves. Anonymous posts appeared on the neighborhood social media page, questioning whether security cameras were being used to collect data on residents' routines. Each rumor was carefully crafted to seem plausible while stoking the suburban fear of change and outside influence. Karen was playing a longer game now, attempting to turn the community against us through doubt rather than direct confrontation. The physical evidence of her campaign appeared gradually. First, it was small things, mail that looked tampered with, garbage bins knocked over on non-windy days. Then one morning I found our newly planted flower bed destroyed, plants uprooted and scattered across the lawn. My backup cameras captured only a hooded figure in the pre-dawn darkness, face carefully angled away from any recording devices. My wife found the damage first. When I returned from my morning run, she was kneeling in the soil, tears streaming down her face as she tried to salvage what remained of her gardening work. "Why will she not just leave us alone?" she asked, voice breaking. "What did we ever do except buy a house and try to live our lives?" I helped her replant what could be saved, but something had broken in my wife's spirit. The hopeful excitement she had once felt about our home had been replaced by constant vigilance and dread. She jumped at unexpected sounds. She checked locks repeatedly. She stopped gardening in the front yard entirely. That evening, I contacted my attorney. "We need to discuss a restraining order and civil action," I explained. "The situation has escalated beyond HOA politics into targeted harassment and property damage." "Document everything," he advised. "Every incident, every piece of evidence. We will need to establish a clear pattern of behavior to convince a judge." I upgraded our security system again, adding motion-activated lights and 2 additional cameras with wider coverage angles. The footage was now backing up to 3 separate locations: my server, the cloud, and the sheriff's monitoring system. If Karen made another move, there would be no question about who was responsible. 3 nights later, at 2:17 a.m., all external cameras triggered simultaneously. I woke to the alert on my phone, pulling up the live feed to see a figure moving along our property line. The night vision clarity was exceptional, showing Karen Wexley, hood pulled up despite the warm evening, carrying what appeared to be a gallon container. I watched in real time as she methodically poured a liquid substance in a line along the edge of our lawn where it met the sidewalk. Even through the monochrome night vision, I could see the grass sizzle on contact. She was using some type of herbicide, creating a deliberate dead zone along our property boundary. This time, there was no ambiguity, no plausible deniability. The footage captured her face clearly as she glanced up toward what she thought was our only remaining camera. She seemed unaware of the new installations that provided multiple angles of her act of vandalism. I did not confront her. I did not yell from the window or trigger the lights to scare her away. I simply watched, recording everything, as she finished her task and slipped back across the street toward her house. By first light, a brown line of dead grass marked where the chemical had been poured. By mid-morning, I was sitting in Sheriff Collins' office, showing him the footage on my tablet. "This crosses several lines," he stated after reviewing the evidence. "Trespassing, property damage, and potentially environmental violations depending on what chemicals she used. Combined with the previous incidents and her citation, we have grounds for more serious charges." "I want this to end," I told him simply. "My wife is breaking down. Our home no longer feels safe. This is not about winning anymore. It is about being able to live in peace." Sheriff Collins nodded thoughtfully. "I believe we have sufficient evidence to request a warrant for malicious mischief and criminal stalking. The district attorney will likely add additional charges based on the pattern of behavior." As I left the sheriff's office, I felt no triumph, no satisfaction in Karen's impending downfall. Just exhaustion and the hope that perhaps, finally, this nightmare might be coming to an end. The camera that had started everything had fulfilled its purpose beyond anything I could have imagined, not just protecting our property, but exposing the true nature of a person who had terrorized an entire neighborhood through fear and intimidation. That evening, as my wife and I sat on our back porch, the only outdoor space where she still felt comfortable, I made her a promise. "This will be over soon, and then we can start making this house feel like home again." She squeezed my hand but said nothing, her eyes still scanning the fence line as if expecting shadows to materialize at any moment. The damage Karen had inflicted went beyond dead grass and broken cameras. It would take time to rebuild our sense of security, but for the first time in months, I believed that healing was possible. The legal system moves with deliberate slowness, grinding toward justice with the patience of centuries. Karen's case took 3 months to resolve completely, a period during which our neighborhood began its gradual transformation from battleground back to community. The charges against her were not as dramatic as television might have portrayed. There was no handcuffed perp walk, no jail time for the former HOA tyrant. Instead, she accepted a plea agreement that included restitution for property damage, 2 years of probation, and 100 hours of community service, maintaining the very public spaces she had once ruled over with her clipboard and citations. Perhaps most significantly, the court issued a permanent restraining order prohibiting her from approaching our property or initiating contact with our family. The legal document formalized what the community had already decided. Karen Wexley's reign was over. In her absence, the HOA board underwent a remarkable metamorphosis. Michael Chen stepped into the role of interim president with a distinctly different approach to governance. The first monthly meeting under his leadership lasted precisely 45 minutes, a stark contrast to Karen's 3-hour marathons of micromanagement. "Our goal is simple," he announced to the surprisingly well-attended gathering. "We want to maintain property values while respecting individual homeowners' rights. We are neighbors first, board members second." The Byzantine system of violations and fines was replaced with a streamlined set of reasonable guidelines. Architectural review became a transparent process rather than an exercise in arbitrary power. Most importantly, the culture of surveillance and reporting on neighbors dissolved, replaced by actual community engagement. I found myself unexpectedly nominated to join the board's security committee. My professional background and measured handling of the Karen situation had apparently impressed several neighbors. After some consideration, I accepted the position, viewing it as an opportunity to help establish balanced policies that protected residents without infringing on their freedoms. My first initiative was a neighborhood security workshop. I helped interested homeowners select and install appropriate cameras and security systems, emphasizing both protection and privacy. "The goal is not to watch each other," I explained during the presentation. "It is to ensure we all feel safe in our own homes." Gradually, our house became a home again. My wife planted new flowers in the beds that had been destroyed, this time extending them further into the front yard in a gentle act of reclamation. The dead grass line from Karen's herbicide attack was replaced with a decorative stone border that transformed damage into design. We added wind chimes, bird feeders, and comfortable outdoor furniture, small touches that declared our intention to fully inhabit our space without fear. Karen herself became increasingly absent from neighborhood life. Rumors circulated that she was house hunting in a gated community across town. I neither confirmed nor denied these stories when neighbors inquired. Her journey was no longer intertwined with ours. One evening, as my wife and I enjoyed dinner on our front porch, something unimaginable months earlier, she pointed toward the original camera location above our garage. Though replaced after the destruction, it remained a symbol of the conflict that had defined our first year in the neighborhood. "Do you think we still need all of them?" she asked. "The cameras, I mean." I considered the question seriously. They provide security, peace of mind. "But so does knowing our neighbors now," she countered. "So does having a fair HOA board. So does not living under constant threat." She had a point. In the aftermath of Karen's departure, we had actually formed genuine connections with the families around us. The Johnsons regularly invited us for weekend barbecues. Mrs. Abernathy shared tomatoes from her garden. We had built what we had originally sought, a community. "Perhaps we could reduce them," I conceded. "Keep the essential security without feeling like we are living in a surveillance state." My wife smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression I had not seen often enough in recent months. "I would like that. It would feel like moving forward." The camera above the garage would stay, of course. It had become more than security equipment. It was a reminder that standing up against bullies, even those clothed in authority, was sometimes necessary to protect what matters most. The following weekend, I removed 3 of our auxiliary cameras while keeping the essential coverage. Each removal felt symbolic, a small reclamation of normalcy, a step away from the hypervigilance that had governed our lives. The hard drive containing all the footage still sits in my office drawer. I have not viewed it in months, but its presence serves as a tangible record of truth. Sometimes the strongest defense against chaos is simply having proof of reality when others attempt to distort it. 4 months after Corinne's court hearing, the neighborhood held its annual summer block party. For the first time, it actually felt like a celebration rather than a performance of community organized by decree. Children chased each other across lawns without fear of citations for grass damage. Music played without noise violation warnings. Conversations flowed naturally without Corinne's constant monitoring. I found myself in conversation with Rebecca Watson, now the officially elected HOA secretary. "You know," she confided, "many of us wanted to stand up to her for years. We just never had the concrete evidence or the courage to do it first." "Sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to accept the unacceptable," I replied. "Or one camera," she added with a knowing smile. As twilight settled over Oak Ridge Estates, neighbors lingered in front yards and driveways, reluctant to end the genuine connection that had replaced the artificial perfection of Corinne's reign. My wife leaned against my shoulder, watching fireflies begin their evening dance above lawns that were not all regulation height. "It feels like home now," she whispered, "finally." The camera that saved everything had done more than protect our property. It had revealed truth, restored justice, and ultimately helped transform a neighborhood from a collection of houses ruled by fear into an actual community bound by mutual respect. Sometimes the lens we need most is the one that simply shows reality as it is, without filters or distortion. I would install that camera again tomorrow if needed. But for now, in the warm evening of a neighborhood finding its way back to authentic connection, it stood as a silent guardian, a reminder that sometimes standing firm against injustice creates space for something better to grow.